The morning mist clung to the Scottish Highlands like a secret waiting to be told. In the bustling heart of London, Catherine stood before her wardrobe, her fingers tracing the elegant lines of a sleek blue check coat that would soon become the talk of an entire nation. She had no idea that this single choice would spark conversations across social media, influence fashion trends worldwide, and mark the beginning of a journey that would reveal the true strength of a modern royal partnership. This wasn't just another royal engagement. This was a story of two people balancing duty and authenticity, tradition and innovation, all while the world watched their every move. As Catherine fastened the buttons of that now famous coat, she was stepping into a narrative that would showcase not just her impeccable style, but her growing confidence as a leader, a partner, and a voice for change. What happened next would surprise everyone, including Catherine herself. The early morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine made her final preparations for what would become one of the most talked-about royal visits of the year. The blue check coat hanging in her dressing room seemed to call to her its elegant lines and sophisticated pattern perfect for the day ahead. She had chosen it carefully, knowing that every detail of her appearance would be scrutinized, photographed, and analyzed by fashion experts and royal watchers around the world. William was already downstairs, reviewing the day's itinerary with their private secretary. The Scotland trip had been planned for months, but recent events had given it new significance. The couple needed to show unity, strength, and their commitment to the people of Scotland during a time of political uncertainty. Catherine understood the weight of this responsibility as she slipped into the coat, its fabric feeling like armor against the challenges that lay ahead. The drive to the airfield was quiet, both Catherine and William lost in their own thoughts. They had done hundreds of these official visits, but something felt different about this one. Perhaps it was the way the media had been speculating about their relationship, or the pressure they felt to prove themselves as the future of the monarchy. Catherine watched the London streets pass by through tinted windows, her mind already racing ahead to the crowds they would meet, the speeches they would give, and the impact they hoped to make. At the private terminal, their team was already assembled. Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, checking and double-checking every detail of the journey ahead. Catherine noticed how William seemed more focused than usual, his jaw set with determination. This trip wasn't just about ribbon cuttings and photo opportunities. It was about connecting with real people, understanding their concerns, and finding ways to make a genuine difference in their lives. The flight to Scotland was smooth, but Catherine found herself unable to relax. She pulled out her briefing notes, reviewing the names of the people they would meet, the organizations they would visit, and the key messages they needed to convey. William glanced over at her preparation and smiled, a gesture that reminded her why they made such a strong team. Where she was meticulous and detail-oriented, he brought spontaneity and warmth. Together they balanced each other perfectly. As the plane descended towards Scottish soil, Catherine caught her first glimpse of the rugged landscape below. The rolling hills and ancient castles told stories of centuries of history, tradition, and resilience. She felt a deep connection to this land and its people, understanding that her role wasn't just ceremonial but carried real responsibility. The blue check coat that had seemed like a simple fashion choice that morning now felt like a symbol of her commitment to serve with grace and authenticity. The landing was met by a small group of local officials and security personnel. As Catherine stepped off the plane, the Scottish wind caught her coat, and she was grateful for its warmth and elegance. The photographers who had been waiting captured that moment, though none of them yet realized they were documenting the beginning of what would become a defining chapter in Catherine's royal journey. Their first stop was a small Highland village where a community centre had been struggling to stay open due to funding cuts. Catherine and William had specifically requested this visit because they wanted to highlight the challenges facing rural communities across Scotland. As their convoy wound through narrow roads bordered by stone walls and sheep pastures, Catherine felt her nervousness transform into excitement. This was why she had embraced royal life, for moments like these, when they could shine a light on important issues and hopefully make a real difference. The village of Kilmarnock had prepared for weeks for their arrival. Local residents lined the main street, many holding small Union Jack flags and handmade signs welcoming the royal couple. Children from the local primary school had been practicing songs and preparing artwork to present to their distinguished visitors. Catherine could see the genuine excitement and hope in their faces as the cars approached, and she felt the familiar flutter of responsibility that came with knowing how much these moments meant to ordinary people. At the community centre, they were greeted by Margaret MacLeod, a spirited woman in her 70s who had been fighting to keep the facility open for the past 2 years. Her weathered hands shook slightly as she curtsied to Catherine, but her voice was strong and clear as she explained the vital role the centre played in their small community. It wasn't just a building, she explained. but a lifeline for isolated elderly residents, a safe space for teenagers, and a gathering place that kept their community spirit alive. Catherine listened intently as Margaret described the challenges they faced. Government funding had been cut, local businesses were struggling, and younger families were leaving for opportunities in larger cities. The centre needed new equipment, repairs to the roof, and most importantly, ongoing financial support to continue serving the community. As Margaret spoke, Catherine found herself thinking not just about the immediate problems, but about the broader issues facing rural communities across the United Kingdom. William engaged naturally with the teenagers who used the centre's computer lab and sports facilities. Catherine watched him joke with a group of boys about football, his genuine interest and easy manner putting everyone at ease. She had always admired this quality in her husband, his ability to connect with people from all walks of life without seeming forced or artificial. It was one of the things that made him such an effective royal representative. Moving through the centre, Catherine stopped to watch an art therapy session led by a local volunteer. Elderly residents were working on watercolour paintings, their faces concentrated and peaceful as they created simple landscapes and still life compositions. She spent nearly 20 minutes with the group, asking about their techniques, admiring their work, and learning about how the sessions helped combat loneliness and depression in their isolated rural setting. One woman, Jean Robertson, had been coming to the centre for 3 years after losing her husband. She told Catherine how the art sessions and social interaction had literally saved her life during her darkest period of grief. The blue check coat that Catherine wore seemed to fascinate Jeanne, who had been a seamstress in her younger years. They spent several minutes discussing the construction and design of the garment, a conversation that revealed Catherine's genuine interest in craftsmanship and Jean's lifetime of skills and experience. The kitchen facilities at the centre were being used to prepare a simple lunch for the royal visitors and community members. Catherine insisted on helping with the preparation, rolling up her sleeves and joining the volunteers in making sandwiches and serving tea. The photographers captured images of her working alongside local women, her expensive coat protected by a cheerful floral apron borrowed from the kitchen supplies. During lunch, the conversations became more serious and substantive. Community leaders shared specific examples of how funding cuts were affecting their ability to serve vulnerable residents. A young mother described having to drive 40 minutes each way to find childcare so she could work. An elderly man explained how the centre's transportation service was the only way he could get to medical appointments. These weren't abstract policy issues, but real challenges affecting real people's daily lives. Catherine took careful notes, asking thoughtful questions, and making it clear that she was truly listening and understanding. William contributed his own observations and experiences from similar visits across the country. Together they painted a picture of rural communities fighting to maintain their identity and support systems in the face of economic and social changes beyond their control. As the afternoon progressed, they toured other parts of the village, visiting the primary school, where children performed traditional Scottish songs and demonstrated Highland dancing. Catherine participated enthusiastically, attempting some of the simpler dance steps to the delight of the young performers. Her blue check coat swirled around her as she moved, creating a visual memory that would stay with those children for years to come. The school visit revealed another set of challenges. The head teacher explained how they struggled with outdated technology, limited resources for special needs students, and difficulty attracting qualified teachers to such a remote location. Catherine spent time in classrooms, reading with younger children and discussing science projects with older students. Her genuine engagement and interest were evident to everyone present, from the children themselves to their teachers and parents. At the end of the school visit, 10-year-old Sarah Mackenzie presented Catherine with a drawing she had made, showing the royal couple's visit. The picture depicted Catherine in her distinctive blue coat, standing with William outside the community centre, surrounded by smiling villagers and Scottish flags. Catherine was visibly moved by the gift, kneeling down to Sarah's level to thank her personally and promising to keep the drawing in a special place. As evening approached, their final stop was a local farm that had been in the same family for 4 generations. The farmer, Robert Fraser, explained the challenges facing Scottish agriculture, from changing weather patterns to international trade uncertainties. Catherine and William walked through muddy fields, seemingly unconcerned about their formal clothing as they examined crops and livestock, asking detailed questions about farming practices and economic pressures. The blue check coat that had started the day looking pristine now showed signs of their active engagement, with a small mud stain from the farm visit and wrinkles from hours of bending down to speak with children and elderly residents. Rather than detracting from her appearance, these imperfections seemed to enhance Catherine's authenticity and genuine involvement in the day's activities. During their final conversation with community leaders before departing, Catherine made several commitments that surprised everyone, including William. She promised to follow up personally on several of the issues they had discussed, to connect them with relevant charities and government programs, and to return within the year to see the progress that had been made. These weren't empty royal promises, but specific, actionable commitments that demonstrated her understanding of the real challenges they faced. As they prepared to leave Kilmarnock, a crowd of nearly 200 villagers gathered in the town square to bid them farewell. Catherine and William spent an additional 30 minutes meeting with people they hadn't had time to speak with earlier, shaking hands, accepting flowers, and listening to personal stories. The blue check coat had become a symbol of approachable elegance, perfectly suited to the day's blend of formal duties and genuine human connection. The drive back to their accommodations for the night was filled with animated discussion about everything they had seen and learned. Catherine pulled out her notebook, already planning follow-up actions and thinking about how they could highlight the issues facing rural Scotland in future speeches and initiatives. William watched her with admiration, recognizing how completely she had embraced not just the ceremonial aspects of royal life, but its potential for real impact and positive change. That evening, as Catherine hung up the blue check coat after one of the most meaningful days of her royal career, she reflected on how a simple fashion choice had become part of a much larger story. The coat would appear in newspapers and magazines around the world, but more importantly, it had witnessed her growing confidence and commitment as a royal representative who truly cared about the people she served. The morning of their second day in Scotland dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming across the loch outside their accommodation. Catherine woke early, her mind already racing with thoughts of the day ahead and the commitments she had made to the people of Kilmarnock. The blue check coat hung on the wardrobe door, and seeing it reminded her of the profound connections she had made the previous day. Today would bring new challenges and opportunities, but she felt more prepared and confident than ever before. William was already up, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, studying the detailed itinerary for their visit to Edinburgh. Their schedule included meetings with Scottish government officials, a visit to a youth employment centre, and an evening reception with business leaders and community activists. It was an ambitious agenda that would test their ability to balance diplomatic duties with their growing commitment to grassroots engagement. Over breakfast, they discussed strategy for the day's more formal political meetings. Catherine had spent considerable time preparing for these encounters, reading briefing documents about Scottish economic development, unemployment rates among young people, and ongoing discussions about the country's constitutional future. She understood that these conversations would be more complex and potentially sensitive than their community visits, requiring diplomacy and careful attention to the political implications of every word. The drive to Edinburgh revealed the stunning diversity of Scottish landscapes, from rural farming communities to industrial towns to the magnificent architecture of the capital city. Catherine found herself thinking about the different challenges facing each of these areas, and how their royal platform could be used to highlight both problems and potential solutions. The blue check coat had been chosen for its versatility, appropriate for formal meetings, but comfortable enough for active engagement with people and programs. Their first appointment was at the Scottish Parliament building, where they met with First Minister Helen Macdonald and several cabinet ministers. The meeting room overlooked the historic Royal Mile, and Catherine couldn't help but feel the weight of centuries of Scottish history surrounding their contemporary discussions. The conversations were cordial but substantive, covering everything from rural development funding to youth employment initiatives to environmental protection measures. Catherine surprised everyone, including William, by asking detailed and informed questions about specific programs and their measurements of success. She had clearly done extensive preparation beyond the standard briefing materials, and her genuine interest in policy details impressed the Scottish officials. When the discussion turned to mental health services for young people, she shared insights from her own charity work and suggested potential areas for collaboration between royal foundations and Scottish government programs. The meeting with business leaders focused on economic development and job creation, particularly in areas outside the major cities. Catherine listened carefully as entrepreneurs and executives described both opportunities and obstacles in the current economic climate. She took detailed notes, asking about workforce development, skills training, and support for small businesses. Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of economic challenges that went well beyond what anyone expected from a royal visit. During a brief break between meetings, Catherine stepped outside onto a balcony overlooking Edinburgh's Old Town. The view was spectacular, with the castle dominating the skyline and narrow medieval streets winding down toward the modern city centre. William joined her, and they stood together in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the complexity of the issues they were learning about and their responsibility to use their platform effectively. Their next stop was the Edinburgh Youth Employment Centre, an innovative program that provided job training, educational support, and mentorship for young people aged 16 to 25. The centre operated in a converted warehouse in a working-class neighbourhood, and Catherine was immediately struck by the energy and creativity of the environment. Young people were working on everything from digital media projects to traditional carpentry, with experienced professionals providing guidance and support. The program director, James McKinnon, explained how they worked with young people who had struggled in traditional educational settings, providing alternative pathways to employment and career development. Many of their participants came from difficult backgrounds, including homelessness, family breakdown, and previous involvement with the criminal justice system. The centre provided not just skills training, but also support services, including counselling, financial literacy education, and help with housing and transportation. Catherine spent nearly 2 hours moving through different workshops and training areas. In the Digital Media Lab, she watched teenagers creating professional quality videos for local businesses, learning skills that were directly applicable to growing industries. The woodworking shop was producing both training pieces and actual products sold to support the program. A culinary arts program was preparing meals for local homeless shelters while teaching young people professional cooking skills. What impressed Catherine most was the obvious transformation in confidence and hope among the young participants. Emma McDonald, a 19-year-old who had been homeless at 16, explained how the program had changed her life. She was now completing an apprenticeship in early childhood education and had her own small apartment. Her story was echoed by dozens of other young people who had found direction and opportunity through the centre's programs. The blue check coat proved perfect for the active nature of the visit, as Catherine participated in various workshops and activities. She helped prepare lunch in the culinary program, learned basic carpentry techniques in the woodworking shop, and even tried her hand at video editing in the Digital Media Lab. Her willingness to engage directly with the work being done created natural opportunities for conversation with participants who might otherwise have been nervous about meeting royalty. During lunch with program participants, the conversations became deeply personal and moving. Young people shared their stories of struggle and transformation, describing how the centre had provided not just skills training, but a sense of community and belonging. Catherine listened with genuine empathy and interest, asking thoughtful questions and sharing her own observations about the challenges facing young people across the United Kingdom. One conversation particularly affected her. David Chen, a 22-year-old who had aged out of foster care, described the isolation and fear he had experienced trying to navigate independence without family support. The Employment Centre had provided not just job training, but also practical life skills and emotional support that had made the difference between success and failure. His story highlighted the gaps in support systems for vulnerable young people and the crucial role that programs like this could play in addressing those gaps. After lunch, Catherine and William met with local employers who partnered with the centre to provide apprenticeships and job opportunities. These business owners and managers described how the program produced highly motivated and well-prepared employees who often outperformed workers from traditional educational backgrounds. The partnership model created benefits for everyone involved while addressing real workforce needs in the local economy. The afternoon included a visit to a social enterprise operating out of the same building where program graduates were producing and selling handmade crafts and specialty foods. Catherine was fascinated by the business model that combined commercial success with social impact, creating ongoing employment opportunities while generating revenue to support the centre's operations. She spent considerable time discussing sustainability and growth strategies with the social enterprise managers. As the day progressed, Catherine found herself thinking about how the models and approaches she was seeing in Scotland could be adapted and replicated in other parts of the United Kingdom. She began taking notes not just about specific programs, but about the underlying principles and practices that made them successful. Her notebook filled with ideas for potential partnerships, funding opportunities, and ways that royal support could amplify and expand effective programs. The blue check coat had attracted considerable attention throughout the day, with local media noting its elegant yet practical style. Fashion bloggers were already analyzing its design and speculating about its designer and cost. However, Catherine was more focused on ensuring that media coverage emphasized the substantive issues and impressive programs they were highlighting rather than just her appearance. Late in the afternoon, they visited a community garden project that employed some graduates of the youth program while providing fresh produce for local food banks. Catherine rolled up her sleeves once again, helping to harvest vegetables and learning about urban agriculture techniques. The physical activity and outdoor setting provided a refreshing change from the morning's formal meetings, and she clearly enjoyed the hands-on engagement with both the work and the people involved. The garden project illustrated another aspect of the centre's holistic approach to supporting young people. Participants learnt not just job skills but also developed connections to their community, understanding of environmental sustainability, and pride in contributing to solutions for local problems. Catherine was particularly interested in how the project combined individual development with community benefit, creating multiple levels of positive impact. As evening approached, their final official event was a reception for community leaders, social entrepreneurs, and young people who had benefited from various programs they had visited. The venue was a historic building in Edinburgh's new town, elegantly decorated but with a warm, welcoming atmosphere that encouraged genuine conversation rather than formal protocol. Catherine moved through the reception with confidence and purpose, engaging in substantive conversations about the issues and programs they had learnt about during their visit. She had clearly internalized a great deal of information and was able to make thoughtful connections between different initiatives and organizations. Her conversations were informed by specific details and personal stories from their visits, demonstrating that she had been truly present and engaged throughout the day. The blue check coat remained elegant and appropriate for the evening event, its versatility once again proving perfect for the day's varied activities. Catherine had paired it with different accessories throughout the day, adapting her look while maintaining consistency and style. The coat had become a visual thread connecting all of their activities and symbolizing her approach to royal duties that balanced formality with accessibility. During the reception, Catherine made several informal commitments to follow up on specific issues and programs. She exchanged contact information with key organizers and participants, promising to stay informed about their progress and to look for ways to provide ongoing support. These weren't ceremonial gestures, but genuine commitments to continued engagement and relationship building. One of the most significant moments of the evening came when Catherine delivered brief impromptu remarks to the gathered group. Speaking without notes, she reflected on what she had learned during their visit and expressed her admiration for the creativity, resilience, and effectiveness of the programs they had seen. Her comments were personal and specific, referencing individual conversations and observations that demonstrated her deep engagement with the day's experiences. William watched his wife's confident presentation with obvious pride and admiration. Her growth in comfort and effectiveness as a public speaker had been remarkable, and her ability to connect personally with diverse audiences while maintaining appropriate royal dignity was increasingly impressive. Together, they represented a modern approach to royal duties that emphasized genuine engagement over ceremonial distance. As the evening wound down, Catherine and William spent additional time in smaller group conversations, continuing to learn and build relationships even as their official schedule was ending. The blue check coat showed signs of an active and engaged day, but Catherine looked as polished and energetic as she had that morning, sustained by the meaningful connections and substantive conversations that had filled their time. The drive back to their accommodation was filled with reflection on the day's experiences and planning for their final day in Scotland. Catherine's notebook was filled with contact information, follow-up commitments, and ideas for future initiatives. The blue check coat had been part of a day that perfectly exemplified her evolution as a royal representative who combined style with substance, formality with genuine human connection. The third day of their Scottish visit began with unexpected news that would test Catherine's growing confidence and leadership skills. As she dressed once again in the blue check coat that had become her signature piece for this journey, her private secretary knocked on the door with an urgent message. A major storm system was moving across the Highlands, threatening to disrupt their carefully planned outdoor activities and potentially stranding them in Edinburgh for an additional day. Catherine's immediate reaction surprised even herself. Rather than feeling frustrated by the disruption, she saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate flexibility and resourcefulness. While William coordinated with security and logistics teams to assess their options, Catherine began contacting local organizations to explore alternative ways they could use any unexpected time productively. Her proactive response reflected the confidence she had gained over the previous 2 days. The blue check coat would prove essential as they navigated the changing weather conditions throughout the day. What had been planned as visits to outdoor historic sites and a Highland Games demonstration would need to be completely reimagined. Catherine embraced this challenge, working with their team to develop new plans that would maintain the substance and impact of their visit while adapting to circumstances beyond their control. Their first scheduled stop was still possible despite the weather. The National Gallery of Scotland had prepared a special exhibition highlighting the work of contemporary Scottish artists, many of whom address social and environmental themes in their work. Catherine had always been drawn to art as a form of communication and social commentary, and this visit provided an opportunity to explore these interests while supporting Scottish cultural institutions. The gallery director, Professor Margaret Stewart, guided them through carefully selected pieces that told stories of modern Scottish life and challenges. Catherine was particularly drawn to a series of paintings depicting life in post-industrial communities, their stark beauty capturing both loss and resilience. She spent considerable time discussing technique and meaning with the artists present, her questions revealing a sophisticated understanding of both artistic methods and social context. One artist, Robert McPherson, had created a powerful installation using materials from closed factories and mines, transforming industrial waste into something beautiful and meaningful. Catherine engaged him in an extended conversation about art as a form of social healing and community building. The blue check coat seemed particularly appropriate in this setting, its classic design contrasting with the avant-garde works while maintaining perfect elegance. The gallery visit extended longer than scheduled because Catherine discovered a youth art program operating in the museum's education wing. Despite the timing pressures created by the weather delays, she insisted on meeting with teenagers who were using art to explore their own experiences and aspirations. These young people came from some of Edinburgh's most challenging neighbourhoods, and the program provided both creative outlet and practical skills development. Working with professional artists and therapists, the young participants were creating a collaborative mural that depicted their vision of Scotland's future. Catherine was fascinated by their imagery and symbolism, asking detailed questions about their choices and the emotions they were trying to convey. The conversation revealed the complex perspectives of young people growing up in a time of rapid social and economic change. One 15-year-old, Aisha Patel, had immigrated to Scotland with her family 3 years earlier and was using her art to explore themes of belonging and identity. Her paintings combined traditional Scottish landscapes with symbols from her family's Indian heritage, creating something entirely new and personal. Catherine spent nearly 30 minutes discussing Aisha's work and experiences, clearly moved by her talent and resilience. The blue check coat attracted attention from the young artists, several of whom asked about its design and construction. This led to an impromptu discussion about fashion as art, traditional craftsmanship, and the relationship between clothing and personal expression. Catherine shared her own interest in supporting British designers and craftspeople, connecting her choices as a public figure to broader themes of cultural preservation and economic support. When it became clear that outdoor activities would be impossible due to the intensifying storm, Catherine made a decision that surprised her staff and security team. She requested permission to visit a women's shelter that hadn't been on their original itinerary, explaining that she felt strongly about using their unexpected time to address important but often overlooked issues. The shelter, operated by an organization called Safe Harbour, provided temporary housing and support services for women escaping domestic violence. Catherine understood that such visits required particular sensitivity and careful coordination, but she felt that her platform could help highlight the crucial work being done and the ongoing need for resources and support. The facility manager, Linda Morrison, quickly arranged a visit that would respect the privacy and safety of current residents, while allowing Catherine to learn about their programs and services. Many residents chose not to meet with the royal visitor for obvious privacy reasons, but several staff members and former residents were willing to share their experiences and insights. Catherine was deeply affected by what she learned during this unscheduled visit. The shelter provided not just safe housing but comprehensive support including legal assistance, job training, childcare, and therapeutic services. The complexity of issues faced by residents went far beyond immediate safety concerns, encompassing everything from immigration status to financial independence to rebuilding relationships with children. Sarah MacDonald, a former resident who now worked as a counsellor at the shelter, shared her own story of survival and recovery. She described the terror of leaving an abusive marriage with 2 young children, having no money or support system, and feeling completely alone and desperate. The shelter had provided not just physical safety, but the emotional support and practical assistance needed to rebuild her entire life. The blue check coat felt almost too elegant for this environment, but Catherine's genuine empathy and respectful engagement made her presence feel natural and appropriate. She listened without judgment to difficult stories, asked thoughtful questions about services and needs, and clearly communicated her admiration for both the staff and the women they served. During a private meeting with shelter staff, Catherine learned about the increasing demand for services and the ongoing challenges of funding and community support. Domestic violence had increased during recent economic pressures, but resources for support services had been reduced due to government budget cuts. The gap between need and available help was growing, creating dangerous situations for women trying to escape violence. Catherine took extensive notes during these conversations, asking about specific ways that royal support could help raise awareness and encourage both government and private sector support. She was particularly interested in programs that helped women develop job skills and economic independence, understanding that long-term safety often depended on financial self-sufficiency. The unscheduled shelter visit had created significant delays in their schedule, but Catherine insisted on maintaining their next planned appointment at a university research centre. The Edinburgh Institute for Social Innovation was conducting groundbreaking research on community resilience and social entrepreneurship, areas that connected directly to many of the programs and issues they had encountered during their visit. Professor David Campbell and his research team had prepared a presentation on their findings about what made some communities more successful than others in adapting to economic and social challenges. Catherine was fascinated by the data and analysis, asking detailed questions about methodology and implications for policy development. The research suggested that communities with strong social networks, diverse economic activities, and inclusive leadership were most resilient in facing disruption and change. These findings connected directly to what Catherine had observed in Kilmarnock and Edinburgh, providing academic validation for many of the programs and approaches they had been learning about. The blue check coat was perfect for the university setting, maintaining formality while allowing for active engagement in academic discussions. Catherine's questions and comments revealed her growing expertise in social policy issues and her ability to synthesize information from multiple sources and experiences. During lunch at the university, Catherine met with students and faculty who were working on various research projects related to social innovation and community development. The conversations were stimulating and wide-ranging, covering everything from technology solutions for rural connectivity to innovative financing mechanisms for social enterprises. One graduate student, Michael Ross, was researching the impact of royal visits and public attention on community organizations and local development. His preliminary findings suggested that sustained engagement and follow-up were crucial for maximizing positive impact, confirming Catherine's instincts about the importance of her planned follow-up commitments. The afternoon brought an unexpected opportunity when the storm conditions improved enough to allow a brief visit to Edinburgh Castle. While the original outdoor activities remained impossible, they could tour the historic fortress and meet with representatives of Scottish heritage organisations who had gathered despite the weather challenges. The castle visit provided a powerful reminder of Scotland's complex history and its ongoing relationship with the broader United Kingdom. Catherine was particularly interested in learning about efforts to preserve and interpret Scottish history in ways that were accurate, inclusive, and relevant to contemporary audiences. Standing in the castle's Great Hall, surrounded by centuries of Scottish history, Catherine reflected on her own role in this continuing story. The blue check coat seemed to bridge past and present, combining traditional elegance with modern functionality. She understood that her presence and attention could help ensure that Scottish heritage and culture continued to thrive and evolve. The weather had prevented their planned attendance at a Highland Games demonstration, but several athletes and cultural performers had gathered at the castle to provide a modified presentation of traditional Scottish sports and arts. Catherine was delighted by this adaptation, participating enthusiastically in Highland dancing and even attempting to throw a carver under expert instruction. The blue check coat swirled around her as she moved through the traditional dances, creating a visual connection between royal formality and Scottish cultural tradition. The performers and spectators clearly appreciated her willingness to participate despite the challenging weather conditions and schedule disruptions. As evening approached, their final scheduled event was a private dinner with a small group of Scottish leaders from various sectors including business, academia, arts, and social services. The intimate setting allowed for more personal and substantive conversations about the long-term challenges and opportunities facing Scotland. Catherine's contributions to these dinner conversations demonstrated how much she had learned and absorbed during their visit. She was able to make thoughtful connections between different issues and organizations, suggesting potential collaborations and partnerships that might not have been obvious to participants working within their individual sectors. The blue check coat remained elegant and appropriate for the formal dinner setting, but its familiarity from the previous day's activities seemed to put everyone at ease. Catherine had become associated with active engagement and genuine interest, and the coat had become a symbol of her authentic approach to royal duties. During the dinner, Catherine made several significant commitments for ongoing engagement with Scottish organisations and issues. She promised to host a reception at Kensington Palace for representatives of programs they had visited, to facilitate connections between Scottish organisations and similar programs in other parts of the United Kingdom, and to return to Scotland within 6 months to follow up on specific initiatives. These commitments represented a new level of personal investment in the issues and communities they had encountered. Catherine was moving beyond ceremonial royal visits towards sustained advocacy and support for specific causes and organisations. The blue check coat had been part of a transformation that surprised everyone, including Catherine herself. As their third day in Scotland concluded, Catherine and William spent time reviewing everything they had learned and experienced. The weather disruptions had forced them to be flexible and creative, leading to discoveries and connections that wouldn't have happened with a perfectly executed original plan. Catherine's confidence in handling unexpected challenges had grown significantly, as had her understanding of her potential impact as a royal advocate. The fourth morning of their Scottish journey brought clear skies and a sense of anticipation that electric energy seemed to fill the air around Catherine as she prepared for what would prove to be the most challenging and transformative day of their visit. The blue check coat hung ready, now carrying with it the memories and significance of 3 days of meaningful encounters and growing confidence. Today would test everything Catherine had learned about herself and her capabilities as a royal representative. Breaking news had reached them overnight about a crisis developing in a coastal Scottish community. A major employer in the fishing village of Port Mahomet had announced sudden closure, putting nearly 300 people out of work immediately and threatening the economic survival of the entire community. Catherine's private secretary had received urgent requests for the royal couple to visit and provide both moral support and public attention to the situation. William and Catherine made the decision together to alter their planned schedule dramatically, cancelling less urgent appointments to respond to this emergency. Catherine felt a surge of clarity about her priorities and purpose. The blue check coat would accompany her into a situation where her presence could make a genuine difference in people's lives during their darkest hour. The drive to Port Mahomet took them through some of Scotland's most beautiful but isolated countryside. Catherine used the journey time to study briefing materials hastily prepared by their team, learning about the community's history, the economic factors that had led to the closure, and the likely impact on families and local businesses. The factory had been the backbone of the local economy for over 50 years, with many families having worked there for multiple generations. As their convoy approached the village, Catherine could see the signs of shock and uncertainty. Groups of people stood together on street corners, their body language reflecting the gravity of their situation. The factory parking lot, which would normally be full of workers' cars at this time of day, stood eerily empty. Catherine felt the weight of responsibility as she prepared to meet with people whose entire way of life had been suddenly disrupted. The village hall had been hastily arranged as a meeting point where affected workers and their families could gather with local officials, union representatives, and support services. Catherine and William's arrival brought a moment of hope to what had been a morning of despair and uncertainty. The blue check coat stood out against the muted colors of worry and grief that seemed to permeate the room. Catherine's approach to this crisis situation demonstrated how dramatically her confidence and effectiveness had grown during their Scottish visit. Rather than simply offering sympathy and moving on, she immediately began asking detailed questions about practical support mechanisms, retraining opportunities, and potential economic alternatives for the community. Margaret Fraser, a 55-year-old woman who had worked at the factory for 37 years, broke down while describing her fears about finding new employment at her age. Catherine sat beside her, listening with complete attention and obvious empathy, but also asking practical questions about her skills, experience, and interests. This combination of emotional support and problem-solving focus became Catherine's signature approach throughout the day. The blue check coat proved perfect for the long day of intensive engagement that followed. Catherine moved from group to group, spending substantial time with individuals and families to understand their specific situations and concerns. She met with single mothers wondering how they would support their children, older workers fearing age discrimination, and young people planning to leave for opportunities elsewhere. Each conversation revealed the complexity of the crisis beyond simple job loss. The factory closure threatened the viability of local shops, services, and other businesses that depended on workers' spending. The village school might lose students as families moved away. The local pub and restaurant that served as community gathering places faced an uncertain future. Catherine began to understand how a single economic disruption could unravel an entire community's social fabric. William focused on meeting with local business owners and officials to discuss immediate practical support and longer-term economic development possibilities. Catherine chose to concentrate on the human impact, spending time with affected workers and their families to understand their individual circumstances and needs. Their complementary approaches demonstrated the strength of their partnership in addressing complex challenges. After spending 2 hours in individual conversations, Catherine requested permission to address the entire gathering. Standing at the front of the village hall, still wearing the blue check coat that had become a symbol of her authentic engagement, she delivered remarks that surprised everyone with their specificity and substance. She had clearly absorbed enormous amounts of information during her conversations, and her comments referenced specific details about local challenges and individual circumstances. More importantly, she announced several concrete commitments for ongoing support that went far beyond typical royal sympathy and moved into the realm of genuine advocacy and assistance. Catherine promised that she would personally contact the Secretary of State for Scotland to discuss emergency support measures for the community. She committed to connecting local officials with successful economic development programs she had learned about during their visit. Most significantly, she announced her intention to organize a summit bringing together government officials, business leaders, and community representatives to develop a comprehensive response plan. These commitments represented a new level of personal investment and political engagement for Catherine. She was using her royal platform not just for ceremonial purposes but as a tool for practical problem-solving and advocacy. The blue check coat had witnessed her transformation from royal visitor to community champion. Following her address, Catherine spent additional time meeting with local young people who were facing difficult decisions about their futures. The factory closure meant that many would need to leave Port Mahomet to find work, potentially ending centuries-old family connections to the community. Catherine listened to their dilemmas with obvious concern and began brainstorming ways to create local opportunities that might allow some to stay. One 18-year-old, Connor Mackenzie, had planned to start working at the factory after finishing his education, following in his father's and grandfather's footsteps. Now he faced completely uncertain prospects with limited resources to pursue further education or relocate for work. Catherine spent nearly 30 minutes discussing his interests and abilities, ultimately connecting him with information about apprenticeship programs and educational support that might provide alternative pathways. The blue check coat remained elegant despite the emotional intensity of the day's activities. Catherine's ability to maintain appropriate dignity while engaging in deeply personal conversations demonstrated her growing mastery of royal duties that balanced formality with genuine human connection. The coat had become a symbol of accessible elegance, appropriate for both ceremonial functions and crisis response. During lunch at the local pub, Catherine continued her informal meetings with community members, while also learning about the broader economic challenges facing Scotland's coastal communities. The pub owner, Janet MacLeod, explained how fishing restrictions, tourism fluctuations, and population loss were affecting small communities throughout the region. The factory closure was part of a larger pattern of economic disruption that threatened traditional ways of life. Catherine's questions revealed her increasing sophistication in understanding economic and social policy issues. She asked about government support programs, European Union regulations, infrastructure needs, and workforce development initiatives. Her notebook filled with specific information and potential action items, demonstrating her commitment to follow through on the issues she was learning about. The afternoon brought a visit to the closed factory itself, where Catherine and William met with union representatives and management officials to understand the factors that had led to the closure and possibilities for alternative uses of the facility and equipment. The empty production floor was stark and depressing, but Catherine asked detailed questions about the machinery, workforce skills, and potential for attracting new employers. Walking through the silent factory in her blue check coat, Catherine embodied a striking contrast between royal elegance and industrial decline. However, her engagement with technical details and economic realities demonstrated that her interest went far beyond symbolic gestures. She was genuinely trying to understand the situation and identify potential solutions. The factory visit included meetings with representatives of the skilled workforce, including engineers, maintenance specialists, and production supervisors whose expertise might be valuable to other employers. Catherine discussed their willingness to relocate, interest in retraining, and ideas for alternative uses of their skills. These conversations provided insights into the human capital resources available for economic development efforts. One significant development during the factory visit was Catherine's meeting with a group of workers who had been exploring the possibility of forming a cooperative to purchase equipment and start their own business. Their preliminary business plan focused on producing specialized components for renewable energy installations, taking advantage of their manufacturing skills while entering a growing market. Catherine was fascinated by this entrepreneurial response to crisis, and spent considerable time discussing their plans, financing needs, and technical challenges. She promised to connect them with business development experts and potential investors, demonstrating her commitment to supporting innovative solutions, rather than simply offering sympathy. The blue check coat had now witnessed Catherine's evolution from ceremonial visitor to active problem solver and advocate. Her transformation during the Scottish visit reflected not just personal growth, but a new understanding of how royal influence could be used for practical benefit rather than purely symbolic purposes. Late in the afternoon, they visited the village school where teachers and parents were discussing the potential impact of population loss on educational programs and community services. Catherine participated in these conversations as both a concerned observer and a parent herself, understanding how community disruption affected children's stability and opportunities. The school principal, Robert Campbell, explained how they were already seeing effects as some families made immediate decisions to relocate. The school's music and sports programs might be eliminated due to reduced enrollment, and several specialist teachers might lose their positions. Catherine listened with obvious concern, understanding how educational disruption would compound the other challenges facing the community. During her school visit, Catherine spent time in classrooms with children who were trying to understand what the factory closure meant for their families and their future. Her conversations with these young people revealed their anxiety and confusion, but also their resilience and hope. The blue check coat seemed to comfort them, representing stability and elegance in a time of uncertainty. As evening approached, Catherine and William attended an emergency meeting of the local council, where officials were developing immediate response plans and longer-term strategic approaches. Catherine's participation in these discussions marked another evolution in her royal role, as she contributed specific insights and commitments rather than simply observing political processes. Her detailed knowledge of the community's situation and her concrete commitments for follow-up support impressed local officials who had not expected such substantive engagement from a royal visit. Catherine had moved beyond ceremonial duties to become a genuine partner in addressing community challenges. The day concluded with an informal gathering at the village hall where community members could share their concerns and hopes with each other and their royal visitors. Catherine moved through the crowd with confidence and compassion, continuing conversations from earlier in the day and making new connections with people she hadn't yet met. The blue check coat had become a familiar and comforting sight to the community members who had spent the day with Catherine. Rather than creating distance through formal elegance, it had become a symbol of consistent presence and authentic concern. Catherine had used fashion as a tool for connection rather than separation. As they prepared to leave Port Nahomac, Catherine made one final commitment that surprised everyone, including William. She announced her intention to return to the community in 3 months to follow up on the progress of support efforts and to participate in the business development summit she had proposed. This wasn't a typical royal promise, but a specific, accountable commitment to ongoing engagement. The drive away from Port Nahomac was quiet and reflective. Catherine spent the time reviewing her notes from the day and planning immediate follow-up actions. The blue check coat had been part of one of the most meaningful and impactful days of her royal career, demonstrating how personal style could support rather than overshadow substantive engagement with important issues. That evening, as Catherine prepared for their final day in Scotland, she reflected on how dramatically her understanding of her royal role had evolved. The blue check coat hanging in her wardrobe represented not just a fashion choice, but a symbol of her transformation into a royal representative who combined traditional elegance with modern effectiveness and genuine commitment to making a difference in people's lives. The final day of their Scottish journey dawned with a sense of completion and transformation that Catherine could feel deep in her bones. As she dressed one last time in the blue check coat that had become so much more than a garment, she reflected on the extraordinary week they had experienced. The coat now carried with it the stories of every person she had met, every conversation she had engaged in, and every commitment she had made to return and follow through. This morning was different from all the others. Catherine felt a new confidence in her abilities and a clear understanding of how she wanted to use her royal platform going forward. The blue check coat had been part of a journey that had transformed her from a dutiful royal representative into a passionate advocate for real change. Today would bring final meetings and farewells, but also new beginnings and a redefined sense of purpose. Their first appointment was a return visit to the Edinburgh Youth Employment Centre, where Catherine had promised to announce new support initiatives based on what she had learned during their time in Scotland. The young people who had shared their stories with her earlier in the week gathered again, along with program staff and local officials who were curious about what concrete support the royal visit might produce. Catherine arrived with a detailed proposal that surprised everyone with its scope and specificity. Working with her team overnight, she had developed a plan for a new Royal Foundation initiative focused on supporting youth employment programs across rural Scotland. The proposal included specific funding commitments, partnership arrangements with existing organisations, and measurable goals for impact over the next 3 years. The The blue check coat seemed particularly appropriate for this formal announcement, combining elegance with the practical, accessible style that had characterized Catherine's approach throughout their visit. As she presented the proposal, she referenced specific conversations and individuals from their week, demonstrating how completely she had absorbed and internalized the experiences they had shared. Emma MacDonald, the young woman who had shared her story of transformation from homelessness to stable employment, was visibly moved as Catherine described how her experience had influenced the design of the new support program. The initiative would specifically address the gaps in services that Emma and others had identified, including housing support, mental health services, and ongoing mentorship beyond the completion of job training. The announcement represented a new model for Royal charitable work, moving beyond traditional patronage to active program development and implementation. Catherine had used her Scottish visit not just to learn about existing needs, but to design specific responses that could make measurable differences in young people's lives. Following the announcement, Catherine spent additional time meeting with program participants and staff to discuss implementation details and ongoing partnership arrangements. Her questions revealed a sophisticated understanding of program management, evaluation metrics, and sustainability challenges. The blue check coat had witnessed her evolution into a serious social policy advocate. Their next appointment was at the University of Edinburgh, where Catherine had been invited to deliver a keynote address at a symposium on community resilience and social innovation. The invitation had come as a result of her impressive engagement with academic researchers earlier in the week, and her acceptance had surprised many who hadn't expected such intellectual engagement from a royal visit. Catherine's speech drew extensively on the experiences and insights from their week in Scotland, weaving together academic research with real-world observations and personal encounters. She spoke about the importance of listening to communities, understanding local context, and designing support systems that built on existing strengths rather than imposing external solutions. The blue check coat was perfect for the academic setting, maintaining royal dignity while reflecting the practical, engaged approach that Catherine had demonstrated throughout their visit. Her speech was interrupted several times by spontaneous applause as she described specific examples of innovation and resilience they had witnessed. One of the most powerful moments in her address came when Catherine spoke about the factory workers in Port Mahomac who had responded to crisis by developing plans for cooperative ownership and renewable energy manufacturing. She used their example to illustrate broader principles about community self-determination and the importance of supporting grassroots innovation. The academic audience was clearly impressed by the depth and sophistication of Catherine's analysis. Her comments during the subsequent panel discussion revealed genuine engagement with complex social and economic theories, informed by extensive reading and careful observation. The blue check coat had become associated with intellectual seriousness as well as compassionate engagement. During the lunch break, Catherine met privately with several university researchers whose work related to issues they had encountered during their visit. She discussed potential partnerships between academic research and Royal Foundation initiatives, exploring ways to ensure that charitable work was informed by evidence and evaluated for effectiveness. Professor Sarah Mitchell, who studied rural economic development, was particularly impressed by Catherine's understanding of the interconnections between different community challenges. Their conversation explored possibilities for collaborative research that could inform both academic understanding and practical intervention strategies. The afternoon brought their final scheduled event in Scotland, a reception at the Palace of Holyrood House for representatives of all the organisations and communities they had visited during the week. The gathering provided an opportunity to celebrate the connections they had made and to announce several new collaborative initiatives that had emerged from their experiences. Catherine used the reception to make several significant announcements that demonstrated her commitment to sustained engagement with Scottish issues. In addition to the Youth Employment Initiative, she announced plans for an annual summit on rural community development, a new scholarship program for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and ongoing royal support for social enterprise development. The blue check coat was perfectly suited to the formal palace setting, but its familiarity from the week's activities helped create an atmosphere of warmth and connection, rather than distant ceremony. Catherine moved through the reception with confidence and grace, continuing substantive conversations with people she had met during their travels. One particularly meaningful moment came when Margaret MacLeod from Kilmarnock presented Catherine with a tartan scarf hand-woven by members of the community centre they had visited on their first day. The gift represented not just a beautiful craft item, but a symbol of the ongoing relationship they had established between the royal couple and the rural Scottish community. Catherine's acceptance speech for the gift revealed how deeply the week's experiences had affected her. She spoke with visible emotion about the privilege of meeting so many inspiring people, and learning about their challenges and innovations. The blue check coat seemed to represent continuity and commitment, as she promised to honor the trust they had placed in her. During the reception, several unexpected partnerships and collaborations were announced that had developed spontaneously during the week's activities. The Youth Employment Centre in Edinburgh had connected with the Community Centre in Kilmarnock to share best practices and resources. The Women's Shelter had partnered with the University Research Centre to develop better evaluation methods for their programs. Catherine had facilitated many of these connections through her careful attention to common interests and complementary capabilities among the organisations they had visited. Her role as a convener and connector represented another dimension of effective royal leadership that went beyond traditional ceremonial functions. As the reception concluded, Catherine and William spent additional time in private meetings with key organisers and community leaders to finalise follow-up commitments and communication plans. The blue check coat had been part of establishing genuine working relationships that would continue long after their departure from Scotland. The final hour of their visit included a brief return to Port Mahomac, where Catherine had promised to check on developments since their crisis visit the day before. The community had been energised by the attention and support they had received, and several concrete developments had already begun. The factory workers exploring cooperative ownership had received commitments from potential investors and technical advisors. Local officials had been contacted by economic development specialists offering assistance with planning and implementation. Most importantly, the community had begun to see possibilities for their future beyond the immediate crisis of job loss. Catherine's return visit, while brief, demonstrated her commitment to accountability and follow-through. She met with the core group of workers developing the cooperative business plan, providing additional contacts and resources that could help them succeed. The blue check coat had become a symbol of reliable support and genuine partnership. As their helicopter prepared for departure from Port Mahomac, Catherine stood with William at the edge of the village, looking out over the coastal landscape that had become so meaningful to them. The blue check coat fluttered in the sea breeze as she reflected on everything they had learned and experienced during their week in Scotland. The flight back to London provided time for comprehensive debriefing and planning for implementation of all the commitments they had made. Catherine's notebook was filled with contact information, follow-up tasks, and ideas for future initiatives. The blue check coat had been part of establishing a new model for royal engagement that emphasized substance over ceremony. During the flight, Catherine and William discussed how dramatically their understanding of effective royal service had evolved during the week. They had moved beyond traditional patronage and ceremonial duties to become active partners in addressing community challenges and supporting social innovation. The media coverage of their visit focused significantly on Catherine's style and the blue check coat, but the substantive commitments and policy announcements ensured that fashion coverage was balanced with serious discussion of social issues. Catherine had successfully used her platform to draw attention to important causes while maintaining appropriate royal dignity. As they approached London, Catherine felt a profound sense of accomplishment and clarity about her future direction. The blue check coat represented not just a successful fashion choice, but a symbol of her transformation into a royal leader who combined traditional elegance with modern effectiveness and genuine commitment to making a difference. The final photograph of their Scottish visit showed Catherine and William descending from their aircraft at the London airport, the blue check coat still elegant after a week of intensive activity. But the real story was not captured in any photograph. It was the network of relationships, commitments, and ongoing initiatives that would continue to grow and develop long after their return. That evening, as Catherine finally hung up the blue check coat after their extraordinary week, she knew that it had been part of something much larger than a royal visit. It had been part of her emergence as a leader who understood how to use royal privilege and platform for genuine social impact. The coat would be remembered by fashion historians, but more importantly, it had been worn by someone who had learned to combine style with substance in service of others. The following months would bring regular follow-up visits, implementation of new programs, and ongoing relationships with the people and communities they had encountered in Scotland. The blue check coat had been part of establishing a new standard for royal engagement that prioritised authentic connection and measurable impact over traditional ceremony and distant formality. Catherine's transformation during the Scottish visit represented not just personal growth, but an evolution in what modern royal service could accomplish. The blue check coat had become a symbol of accessible elegance, intellectual engagement, and genuine commitment to using privilege and platform for the benefit of others. It had been part of a week that changed not only Catherine's understanding of her role, but also the expectations and possibilities for royal leadership in the 21st century.